know that have visited the Goldsboro Museum, I am a storyteller also. So I'm gonna try to keep my stories short, because sometimes my stories can get kind of long when I tell stories about Goldsboro. Because Goldsboro, the history in Goldsboro goes on and on and on and on. But I'm only gonna tell a few stories quick this time, okay? But first, before I start, I want to share some good news with you, and I hope Pasha doesn't mind me sharing this good news with you. The Goldsboro Museum has been awarded a $500,000 grant. To build a new Goldsboro Museum. And we will be in the same place that we are now. Only thing, we won't have the art square anymore, because the museum will be built partly on the art square and partly where the trailer is now. So this is good news. We are very excited about it. Hopefully this time next year we'll be on our way to move into a new building. But we've come a long way since then. And I'm going to start in when Goldsboro was incorporated in 1891. Goldsboro was incorporated as a township, the second township, all black incorporated township in the United States, second to Eatonville. Eatonville was number 1, Goldsboro was number 2. At the time when Goldsboro was incorporated as a township, Goldsboro was in Orange County. It was not in Seminole County. Seminole County had not been incorporated at the time. Seminole County was still part of Mosquito County. So therefore, a lot of the history that we need, and to go back, we gotta go to Orange County, because that's where the history was recorded and saved in Orange County. Now, Goldsboro and Eatonville, you can say that they were sisters or sister cities, because Eatonville is only 3 years older than Goldsboro. But the thing about it, the 2 founders were brothers. The founder of Eatonville was Joe Clark, and the founder of Goldsboro was William Clark. And if you heard that name before, William Clark, there was a housing project in Sanford named after Mr. William Clark. Now, when Goldsboro was incorporated and Eatonville was incorporated, they were like I said, both are in Orange County. So they visit each other, they came back to each other, and as you know, everything was segregated around this time. Everything was segregated, including the Ritz Theater. But the Ritz Theater was only in the 20s. It didn't come along until the 20s. Goldsboro charter lasted until 1911. And in 1911, Goldsboro lost their charter due to a man in Sanford named Mr. Forrest Lake. And Forrest Lake went to Tallahassee after discussing all of this with the commissioners and all of the founders of Sanford and all. They needed to expand. Now, sometimes there are 2 stories to this story that I'm telling now. So you get in my story, and my story is a little different from their story, okay? So in my story, Forrest Lake went to Tallahassee to petition the legislation to disband Sanford Charter, Goldsboro Charter, and Sanford Heights Charter. There were another city south of Sanford called Sanford Heights. Now, this is one of the reasons that Sanford could not expand, because they couldn't go north because of the river. They couldn't go east because it was such marshland. The land had not been developed. The seawall had not been built. So you You really ran into marshland very quick. And they couldn't go south because of Sanford Heights. And Sanford Heights, if you notice, that there are some of the old houses that's built past I guess 20th Street, over on the east side. Now, so how did Goldsboro have to expand? Go west. What was west? Goldsboro. Sanford had to either jump over Goldsboro to expand or take Goldsboro. And this is what happened. 3 days after he petitioned the legislature, 3 days that he got his wish, but he came back 3 days later with one charter, and that was Sanford. Goldsboro was not chartered anymore as a township, and Sanford Heights was not chartered anymore. They all became Sanford. Now the other story is that Goldsboro annexed into Sanford. Not true. This proves that Goldsboro, get the right one here. This proved that Goldsboro was not annexed into Sanford. This is a lawsuit. And it's filed, it went all the way to the Florida Supreme Court, where the people of Goldsboro sued the city of Sanford to get their charter back. This took 40 years. It was a 40-year lawsuit. Oh my. And they lost the lawsuit. And so Goldsboro and Sanford, believe it or not, became enemies. That's where the feud started. And sometimes it's a feud that's still going on now. One time we thought we were making progress with this feud. We had some young people in Sanford that wanted to move Sanford forward. We had a mayor named Jeff Triplett. We had a mayor named Brady Lassard. We had a mayor named Larry Dale. They wanted to push Sanford forward and forget the past. Forget about what happened in the lawsuit. Forget that. Let's start over. So we were making progress. We were making a little bit of progress, but then Trayvon Martin happened. Put us back 30 years. So now we are trying now to overcome that part of what happened in the city of Sanford. Now, in all of the commotions and everything that went on with Goldsboro, after Goldsboro was only a township for 20 years. Okay, there were a lot of things that happened, but I'm not gonna try to talk about all of them. I'm gonna talk about the post office. Goldsboro had its own post office. And the new building we're gonna build is gonna be, the front of it gonna look like the Goldsboro post office back in 1911. Okay, and that building was declared a U.S. post office in 1898, the U.S. post office. Now, what happened there is they closed. They also had a post office in Upsalem. But they closed the post office in Upsalem, and Upsalem had to come to the post office in Goldsboro to pick up their mail. So this started another kind of feud because they didn't want to come to Goldsboro to get their mail. Now, the mail was not inside the post office. Everybody had a box, a mailbox along historic Goldsboro Boulevard. At that time, it was 13th Street. And that's one thing Forrest Lake did. Once he got the charter disbanded, he changed all the name of the streets in Goldsboro were named after the founders. He changed all the names to numbers. Why? Maybe because that was so that you wouldn't remember the history. Since then, we've gotten two of them changed back. We've got William Clark, who was named after the founder of Goldsboro. It was Mr. Forrest Lake changed that street from William Clark, who was the mayor of Goldsboro at the time, And at the time, he was serving as Mayor Sanford. So he changed William Clark Avenue to Lake Avenue. And that's how we got Lake Avenue. And he changed Goldsboro Avenue to 13th Street. Now, we've changed it back to historic Goldsboro Boulevard. And getting past some of these feuds that we were having, no one liked to be things taken away from them. And partially, we didn't bring it, but I have a list of the money that the city of Goldsboro owed, the city of Sanford owed the citizens of Goldsboro. They left owing the town $10,075 or something, 700.
You have that in the first one.
You
have that one in that one.
Okay.
This one, this chart.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, political sham. These are some of the articles that was written about they called it political sham, because it was political, the way Goldsboro charter was dismantled. And the thing about it, it was just so, people were afraid, because around the time, it wasn't long after that they burned down Rosewood, Ocoee. So people sort of like went into their own little shells in Goldsboro. And if you came to Goldsboro and you were visiting and you say, well, what happened here? Or either if you go to Edenville, the people in Edenville thought that the reason Goldsboro was not Goldsboro anymore because they had burned it down. They burned Goldsboro down. No, it wasn't Goldsboro. It was Rosewood, where a lot of those people ended up in Goldsboro. Okay, so it was like, no, we didn't go downtown. We didn't even work for the white folks that was in Sanford. And you say, well, what did they do? They worked for the ladies, and the older men worked for the citizens of Sanford Heights. Remember, Sanford Heights was a city too. So they were upset with the city of Sanford too. And also you had the railroad coming through. A lot of them worked on the railroad. You had the docks, Sanford docks. A lot of them worked on Sanford docks. So it was, where do we get labor if we don't have the blacks to work in the fields? What fields we talking about now? We talking about Sarah fields now, because the orange groves were burned out. Not the orange groves burned out. Freeze had killed the oranges in 25. Killed all the orange groves. So now we gotta find something else for farmers to make a living off of. So they got this great idea to plant celery, because celery could endure the cold winters if we had cold winters. Now, they didn't have anybody to work these fields. So what they did, they started going to West Florida, bringing people back from West Florida in trucks and buses until there were no place for them to be. So there were a lot of camps in Goldsboro. You had the camps where the guys from the railroad worked or lived, and you had camps for the farm workers. 1943, the Housing Act passed. And that's when we built, the city fathers built the first housing project, Castleboro Court. And then after Castleboro Court, we had William Clark Court. And they just kept building and building and building and building till you had 5 housing projects in Sanford, 1 in Georgetown. That's what killed Sanford. You cannot, Sanford finally realized that in order for Sanford to move, they can't house 5 housing projects, okay? Because who wants to move in a town where everybody in the town live for the first of the month? The checks, okay? Now, let's talk about some of the schools in Goldsboro. this is we got a teacher's register here from 1908. We got the whole register, 1908. And if you see here, this school was still part of Orange County. So what happened to the schools? This was Goldsboro Elementary. What happened to the school when they took the charter? They closed the school. They closed Goldsboro Elementary. And they built a school on Cypress Avenue and called it Sanford Colored School.
Is that Hopper now? Is that Hopper?
No. Harper was built in 1910.
Oh, okay.
This was 1908.
Okay.
So Harper came 2 years later. No, the school was actually where the Elks is now. So now, in 1916, by now, Seminole County is incorporated, because Seminole County was incorporated in 1913. Seminole County is incorporated, so the children, everything has to come back to Seminole County. The school was too small. They didn't have enough land over there, so they had to come back to Goldsboro. So in 1916, they built Goldsboro Elementary School again. And they named it Goldsboro Elementary School. So in 1916, in 2016, Goldsboro celebrated the 100th anniversary of Goldsboro Elementary School. Goldsboro Elementary School is the oldest standing school on the same grounds and everything in Seminole County. Now, what else happened in Sanford that kind of got us off track again? Jackie Robinson. Sanford never got the, I would say, the honor and the praise, because Sanford wanted to stay at that time a farming town. They wanted to stay a farming town. Bringing Jackie Robinson and other people here, they were already upset because the Navy base was here. Because a lot of people were, instead of working in the farm, they were working on the Navy base. The farmers are one of the reasons the Navy base closed. They moved to Albany, Georgia. Okay, but anyway, this is another story where it's my story and their story. Okay, so I'm gonna tell my story. You already know their story because it was in a movie called 42. Okay, now if you haven't seen the movie, it's a good movie to watch, and then you're gonna see some of the things that I'm talking about. Because this man right here, Mr. Brock, let me see. Okay, the fat man right here talking with his hands, Mr. Brock. The Brock house is still on Sanford Avenue. Mr. Brock house is where Jackie Robinson stayed when he came to Sanford to play an exhibition game in the Sanford Stadium. Well, in 42, they said it was a night game. It was not a night game, it was a day game. The Ku Klux Klan had been meeting where the nursing home is now, right across from there. Well, they had had a meeting, and they had been meeting and waiting for Jackie Robinson, who a lot of you may not remember. Chief William was the chief at the time. He was the chief of police. And Chief William was there. Thank you, Pop. You'll see Mr. Brock right here. Okay, Chief William was there when they were in the dugout. Apparently, they sneaked him in the dugout before the Klans knew he was there. So the story was told to us that there were 3 little boys. They were grown men, they dead now. 3 little boys who were peeping through the gates, because like I said, it was a night game, a day game, and they were peeping through the gates, and they saw the sheriff, chief of police, Chief William, go take Jackie Robinson out the dugout. Because the Klan had told Chief William, if you don't get him, we'll get him. So Chief William went and took him out of the dugout and took him to the police station. And those three boys, one was a Murphy, one was a Dixon, and I forgot what the other one's name was. But anyway, when he took him to the police station, these little boys ran to Mr. Brock. Mr. Brock, Mr. Brock. Chief William got Jackie Robinson. Chief William got Jackie Robinson. Well, if you can see here, Mr. Brock is talking with his hand. He was the black mayor during the time. You know, you always had a black mayor. He was the black mayor during the time. And so he told the boys, he said, you go tell Chief William to bring that boy to my house, talking about Jackie Robinson. Bring that boy to my house, and they better not hurt a hair on his head. And they did. They brought him to Mr. Brock's house. In the movie, they got him running from the KKK at night, but that didn't happen. According to our story, he slept good that night at Mr. Brock's house. Next morning, he went to D-Land. He didn't get a chance to play in Sanford. He went to D-Land the next morning, and they had locked the gates. They wouldn't let him in. So the next day, he was at Daytona. They called the game off. So he didn't play there. But later on, he did get a chance to play in Sanford sometime much later. But that's my Jackie Robinson story. Oh, Pasha wants me to do the gun.
I got it.
You got it?
That's not loaded, is it?
No.
It's quite old.
As a matter of fact,
It's very heavy. It may be. Maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, that's real.
No iron there.
if you iron. Well, this gun belonged to Miss Alfreda Wallace. I don't know if any of y'all remember Miss Alfreda Wallace. If you were part of the Seminole County Historical Association, I video over there said, yeah, he remembers Miss Alfreda Wallace. I heard about Miss Alfreda Wallace. Okay, this gun was Miss Alfreda Wallace's daddy's gun. This was one of the guns that held the Ku Klux Klan out of Goldsboro. The story is, this is my story now. The story is, you had a store in Goldsboro that had a habit of putting it was owned by a white man, and they were a habit of putting black boys in the freezer. So the people of Goldsboro just got sick and tired of this, and they boycotted the store. And no one were allowed to go in that store as far as community concerned. So he couldn't survive without, people going into the store. So I guess he was one of the clans too. So for what the blacks in Goldsboro had done to him, they were gonna ride on Goldsboro. So all the men of Goldsboro decided to get their guns and go to Lake Avenue. Lake Avenue, that's the one I told you, Forrest Lake named after himself. And they lined up along Lake Avenue with their guns. The Klans came that night. And it was my understanding that by the time they got to Lake Avenue, all the men's guns were pointed at them in Goldsboro. And they stared each other down. The Klan didn't make a move. The men of Goldsboro didn't make a move. After a while, they turned around and marched back downtown, or wherever they came from, the Klan. And they never marched on Goldsboro again, or never even attempted to march on Goldsboro again. But now they did march in Sanford, down Sanford Avenue, many times, but they never came back to Goldsboro. Now, I'm gonna talk about this one. I'm gonna go back to the schools. Mr. David Scott might remember this. Okay, we're back to schools now. Well, we got high schools. We got Harper that was built in 1910. You got Crooms Academy, who built in 1926, the only black high school in the county. We had elementary schools all over the county. We had Midway, Altamont, which was Roosevelt, Goldsboro, Boogertown. We had elementary schools, but only one high school. Well, in 1970, the consent decree came down that all schools in Seminole County had to be integrated. Well, here we go again. You know, we were kind of speaking to each other, you know, but now we got another problem. What are we gonna do? The school board got together and they decided, okay, we know how to integrate the schools. White children go in the morning and eat, and black children go in the evening. Well, they tried this for a while and it didn't work. Government said, no, that's not gonna work. The half-day divided thing is not gonna work. So they tried some other things, you know, to integrate the schools. Nope, it's not gonna work. So then the government stepped in and said, you gotta really do a better job than what you're doing. So then they said, well, we know what we'll do. We'll close all the black schools and send all the black children to the white schools. So they closed Goldsboro, they closed Goldsboro Elementary, and they closed Crooms High School. And why did they close those schools? Because if they had integrated those schools, that meant the white children would have had to come into the black community to go to school. And that wasn't gonna happen. That wasn't gonna happen. So, when they closed the school, the community of Goldsboro, Georgetown, all the black communities in the county got together, and that was the second lawsuit. We sued Seminole County School Board, but we won that lawsuit. And the lawsuit was, you gotta open Crooms back up. You gotta open Goldsboro back up. So they did the open Crooms. So they made the schedule. Well, these white kids here gonna go to Crooms, and these white kids here gonna go to Goldsboro. So a group of citizens in Sanford decided we're gonna burn Crooms down. They burned our main building, they set it on fire. They had planned to burn the whole school down, but they didn't, since we had the ramps and the wings, they only burned the main building down. But that didn't stop integration. That didn't stop them. They still had to come and go to school at Crooms because they blocked that off and had them to go in the wings. Do you know that we stayed under the consent decree until when, Mr. Scott?
I think it was around 2003, 2004.
Exactly. That's how long we stayed under. From 1970 to around 2003, before Seminole County could get their schools together, okay? And the reason, the way they did it was magnet schools. They came back with them, and the government said, okay, we'll go along with y'all magnet school program. And it seemed like the magnet schools are working out pretty good. So now we got over that one, okay? We got over the white people setting our school on fire. And now Crooms Academy, like I said, that lawsuit we won, and Crooms Academy now is is a school of technology, recognized all over the state, all over the United States. They got a waiting list of children wanting to go in. See, one thing about having a school in the community, they gotta keep the roads up because buses gotta go, okay? And so a community without a school is not a community. So that's what they wanted to happen to Goldsboro. Twice they took our school out of the community. And we had to fight to get them back. Now I'm gonna tell you about the third lawsuit. And then I'm gonna finish up. The third lawsuit was with the city of Sanford again. From From 1953 to 1984, we had blacks to run for city commissioner seat on Sanford City Commission. We never had one to win. So now we gotta depend on the federal government to help us out, come help us out. So we sued the city of Sanford for a single member district, a majority minority district. Okay, and we got it. We won another lawsuit, we won. Remember now, we've only lost one. That was this one. We won that one. We sued the city of Sanford. And the federal government said, cut out a district that's where you got majority, minorities as the majority. So that's when they came up with District 2 in 1983. And in 1984, we elected our first black commissioner from Goldsboro, Bob Thomas. Bob Thomas was our first one. And the lawsuit said that at the time when we got that district was 65% black. Okay? Now, something happened in 2010 that dropped our numbers all the way back down. And what happened is they moved 5 housing projects. And when Sanford finally decided, we don't need these housing projects. We don't need them. We're gonna let them go. But when they let them go, that put our district way down to where below what the government said that we should be. So the city of Sanford, the commission decided, well, we're gonna go and get Georgetown. We're gonna go and get the blacks out of Georgetown. No problem, you know? Let's cross 1792. Because the first district, we didn't cross 1792. So when we lost our majority status, we had to go across 1792 and pick up Georgetown. That was okay, no problem. Guess what? We got the same problem again. Okay, so what we gonna do this time? The best thing to do is to create another district. But we got a city commissioner who's being stubborn and said, no, we're not gonna create another district. We're just gonna go get Washington Oaks and put Washington Oaks in the mix. So what does that do for a candidate like Miss Britt? All of her black votes gone. All of her black votes gone. Because that was her core of black votes, was Washington Oaks. So now, what do we have? We have stepped back 10 years. Because if she lose, then we back at one commissioner.
30 plus years. 83.
Back to 83. Yeah, back to 1983. And if nothing is done soon, we'll be back to 0. So let me see what we got here.
One more, since there was some talk about it on the papers. Describe your interaction with the Sanford Civic Center when you were 15.
That was another
And you
one.
can reference the drinking fountain right there, the white and colored fountains.
Well, David, I'm gonna write what my experience at the Ritz Theater, okay? Because when I went to the Ritz Theater, all the black children had all the blacks sat on top and all the whites sat on the bottom. That I could never understand, because we were so mean to those white kids. Why did they put us on top? You see what I'm saying? Because we throw popcorn down there at them, we threw drinks down there at them. Okay, and in this, we went through this in Sanford, the white water fountain and the colored water fountain, the white bathrooms, the colored bathrooms, okay, right in City Hall. And one thing, Pete knows, we used to call him the Godfather of Sanford. And some of you may remember Pete Knowles, he was city manager. When they built a new civic center, Pete Knowles made it clear that that civic center was built for the whites only, not for the blacks. Okay, well, like in the 60s, the college students marched. And they laid in the streets and they went to jail because the parents couldn't do it because the parents would have lost their jobs. Parents would have been shot, hung, tarred, and feathered. So the kids did it. Well, that's what we tried to do in Sanford. Protect our families. We gonna go to the civic center. Well, at the time I didn't know that it was some grown-ups behind it. But I found out later that it was some grown-ups behind it. But we had a little center in the project where we would go and on Friday nights and Saturday nights, while the white kids were in the big new civic center downtown. So that February 14th, Valentine's Day, 1961, I got the newspaper article. About 4 carloads of us decided we gonna go to the civic center. We gonna mash potatoes too, you know? And we parked on the side the river owned. We didn't park on the side the center owned. We parked on the side with the river. So things always get back. You can't, you know, in Sanford, there's no secrets. It gets back to wherever you're not supposed to get. Well, we all unloaded our car and was headed across the street, and there was a fire hydrant there. I don't know if it's still there. And I guess it was a fireman, I don't know. He said, "Here they come!" And they turned the water on. They turned the water hose on us, the fire hydrant hose on us. Now that was February, it was cold. We ran back to the cars. Well, the next day, five of our boys were arrested. 5 of our boys was arrested. And it was a long time before we even attempted to go back to Sanford Civic Center. So that was another time when we stuck out, you know, we were mad with each other, the blacks and the whites. So we've had a up and down relationship ever since 1911, up and down relationship. But I'm hoping, and I know Sean is too, I'm hoping that all these things that we have experienced will just fade away. And like Rodney King said back in the 70s, why can't we all live together? Any questions?
You went to Crooms Academy, did you
Yes,
graduate from Crooms? How
Yeah.
was that in, was it 61?
Yeah, I graduated in 61. At the time when I graduated in 61, Crooms Academy was all black, no whites. We didn't have white teachers, we didn't have white teachers, we didn't have white children, it was all black. Mhm. And I was in the teacher shakeup in 1970. Remember I told you this consent decree came down? What? Consent decree, that all schools would be integrated in the state of Florida. So my principal called me in at the end of the school year in 69, and he said, I was Jackson at the time, he said, "Miss Jackson, you won't be with us next year." I said, "Where am I going?" He said, "You have been administratively assigned to Eastbrook." I had never heard of Eastbrook. Where is Eastbrook? All I know is I had to go down 436, which was not 436 like it is now. It was all, they were putting the orange trees up. They were widening the road. And then I had to go all the way back down Buffalo Way. And they told me, if you see a blue light on a house, that's a KKK house. So I wouldn't go back to PTA meetings. I wouldn't go back down there for PTA meetings. I worked at Eastbrook 3 years. I took a leave of absence. I didn't go back to 8 years. 8 years later, I went back to the school system. And why? because I couldn't tell the children apart. I was put in an all-white school. I had all my life lived in an all-black neighborhood, all-black school, all-black church, all-black college. I graduated from Savannah State University, all-black college. Everything was black. And then you gonna put me in a school where all the children got blue eyes and blonde hair, you know? And little girl, my first day, little girl came at me and she said, I never had a colored teacher before. And I looked at her, sweetheart, and I said, well, I never had a white child before, you know? And it was rough. It was really rough. It was not only rough on me, like David was telling me, they didn't hire him at Midway because he was white. So it was rough. It wasn't no one-sided thing. It was at least it was equal on both sides.
Did you have a problem pronouncing the children's names?
Oh, yes. See, I was used to Jackson, Smith, Johnson. I get names like Kwiatkowski. All kind of names this long. It was really rough. Uh-huh.
I was gonna add a footnote to your Crooms story about the potential closings. I recall in the early 70s, as part of the integration consent decree, they made Crooms a 9th grade center. And all 9th graders who normally would have gone to Crooms or Seminole High School went to Crooms. And then 10th, 11th, and 12th graders were all at the Seminole High School campus. And then it was in the early 80s, the consent decree, the federal government said that that was unacceptable. And so then the move was going to be to close Crooms again. And this is personal opinion, we had, in my opinion, the greatest superintendent we've ever had, Bob Hughes. He said, no, we're not shelving Crooms. And so Crooms became like an alternative ed center for 7th, 8th, and I think it was just 7th and 8th graders at the time.
No, it was 7th and 8th grade, but it was a school for children that couldn't
Fit in the mainstream.
Couldn't mainstream in the mainstream, and we lost our accreditation during that time.
Yeah, and Barbara Kirby Bentley was the principal and did a fantastic job. In fact, she hired my brother to teach shop there. But then, as the consent decree started heating up in Seminole County, finally realized we needed to do something significant to get out of the consent decree. It would have been around 1999, 2000, is when they decided to make it, Crooms, a magnet school, Academy of Information Technology.
Yeah.
And for me, I like the old historic places, and the original building is gone, and they've renovated everything. It's got a nice brand new campus. But as Francis was saying, it's a school with a waiting list.
Yeah.
Whereas 30 years ago, people dreaded having to go there. Now they can't wait to get in.
Yeah.
We were happy our son got into Crooms Academy.
Yeah.
Very happy.
Yeah, like I said, we've come a long ways, but we still got some ways to go. Goldsboro is still a community, all black community that's still been neglected by the county, the city, and the state. But hopefully we will, like I said, we're gonna work together, or we're gonna do like we did, like Mr. William Clark and his people did. We're gonna incorporate Goldsboro again. We got the numbers.
So you learn something new every day, because I wasn't, going back to education, and I didn't know about the consent decree. So is that why, because I went to Winter Springs in 1997, and I had no idea why I lived in Sanford and went to school 45 minutes away, they bust us out. So I'm just learning that
For the
that
numbers.
today, so is that the reason why we
Yeah,
were
they
bused
tried
out too?
busing. They,
Okay.
like, you forgot to mention that, to satisfy the consent decree, they tried busing too. And the busing didn't work either, because you can't just bus somebody, 2 hours just to integrate a school. You can't do it. And another reason it was so hard to integrate the schools in Seminole County, because we were only what, about 11% black, about 11% black in the county. So that meant we had 89% white. We had whole communities that didn't have a black family living nowhere in the community. So that's why it was so hard to integrate the schools in Seminole County.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Ms. Oliver, so I know, and I don't know if this is related in some way, but I know back in the 50s or sooner than that, or later than that, there was a Jewish temple here in Sanford.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was there any kind of integration or communication between a difference between the white people and the Jewish community and the African American community back
in the day?
Back in
well,
the
you
day.
know, all of First Street was owned by Jews. You know that at one time.
No.
Yeah.
See, no one knows that. I don't think anyone knows that.
You knew that, didn't you?
No, I didn't.
You didn't know that?
So,
They still
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. All of First Street were owned by, well, 3 families, Sarah, and they were brothers and sisters.
Yeah, Sarah Jacobs.
The Jacobs, Sarah Jacobs,
that-
her uncle, her brother,
Mm-hmm.
one brother, I'm gonna tell you what it was. Sarah's daddy on this side of First Street. His brother on the other side of First Street, and the other brother on the Sanford Avenue.
Okay.
I didn't realize the Jacobs were,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they were Jewish. I knew the family having
See,
major
people
holdings.
don't know that part
Now,
of the history too.
And we didn't, the blacks didn't really have a problem with the Jews, because the first job I had was at a department store, and I was hired by one of Sarah's uncles who had a big department store on 13th Street.
Yeah. Well, I also heard that Sanford Ave, the merchants there, like you said, were Jewish merchants that
Yes.
served the Georgetown
They
community.
did, They served the
Yeah,
Georgetown
so-
community, and they had stores that served the Goldsboro community, because I worked in one of those stores.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there's sort of.
Whereas a lot of the other businesses, most of the whites were farmers. And the businesses were downtown Sanford were owned by majority Jews. Mhm. Yeah.
So that relationship probably was a little bit, could you say, not as strained, or was it still strained? Would
No,
you think? 'Cause they
it was-
say, I don't know.
See, okay, you take Sarah. I've been knowing Sarah. Sarah and I about the same age. I've been knowing Sarah. She's older. I've been knowing Sarah since she was a teenager. Now, to give an example, back during that time, black people could not get credit in white stores. But Sarah and her uncles and all, you could get credit. You could get credit in Sarah Jacobs' mom and dad dress shop. Okay? You could get credit. Now, what they had to cater to both blacks and whites. Whites couldn't try on the clothes, but the blacks couldn't try on the clothes. Okay? But she had special clothes that the blacks could try on, but that were in a special department that the whites didn't go in there. Okay? Now, my pediatrician was white, and he had an office on 2nd Street. We had to go in the alley in the back. We couldn't go in the front door. We had to go in the alley in the back. That was the doctor. But he would still treat black children. But everything was like that. Everything was in the back door. Now, this is what, if you read the story of Harry T. Moore in Mims, and when they bombed his house, yeah, we could hear that bomb here in Sanford. It shook Sanford. And the reason he really died, because in Mims, they did not white doctors wouldn't see him. They had to bring him all the way to Sanford to Dr. Starks. He died on the way, and his wife lived 3 days, and she died 3 days later.
What doctor is that you're talking about?
Dr. Starks in Sanford. You remember Dr. Starks? Yeah. Yeah, he had an office on Sanford Avenue, and Dr. Ringland had a dentist office in that same office. He's the one that treated Harry T. Moore when they bummed the house up in Mims. They had to bring him all the way to Mims. I mean, all the way from Mims to Sanford. There were a lot of white doctors refused. Okay, the credit union. When I started teaching, they had a black credit union, a white credit union. I don't know if you remember that. You didn't remember that. But they had a black, and it was upstairs over the Sanford Atlantic Bank. Upstairs. And so they had a line on the end for the black teachers, and the rest of the lines were for the white teachers. And I guess the money was separate too. I guess they had white money, we had black money. Yes.
I had heard at some point, I don't remember who was telling me this, but, before integration, the black community had its own bank, on insurance companies, mostly
yes.
on
Mhm.
Sanford Avenue and maybe Goldsboro, and other businesses, because you couldn't come down here to the white companies. Insurance companies wouldn't sell you insurance to your house or whatever.
No, they wouldn't. They would sell you life insurance, and they would come to your house and collect it.
Okay.
You know, you had the little book, they would mark the little book, 10 cents, 15 cents, and when you died, they gave you $100, you know, to help with the burial.
Right.
But as far as any type of insurance that was worth anything, Now, you did have the black, you had the Afro, it was called Afro Insurance Company, it was a black-owned insurance company. On Sanford Avenue, we had, the Staples had a drugstore, we had our own drugstore, own doctors. I was part of the credit union. We had an all-black credit union, not part of the teachers' credit union. This was a community credit union. We had a community credit union that was all black here in Sanford, yeah.
I think it was Tony Major, he did a documentary.
Yeah, he did,
And I think some of this was in that documentary.
And that document is on YouTube if you wanna look at it.
And he had interviewed a young man who was always sent down on Saturday afternoon to get ribbons for his sister's hair for Sunday morning. You know?
Yeah, back during that time, the ribbons and the bows and all was
And
very popular.
he said, if I didn't say hello to everybody sitting on their front porch, he said, I would get called out.
That was Kenny Pittman.
Yeah.
What's the YouTube?
YouTube, yeah.
I mean,
It-
what would you look at?
You can go on the Goldsboro Museum. We got how many YouTubes? How many we got?
Quite a few videos.
We got quite a few, and you can find those videos
Documentaries,
there
yeah.
too. All of the videos that UCF did, they did, the Rise and Fall of Goldsboro. Was it Rise and Fall of Goldsboro? All those videos are on YouTube, and if you just type in Goldsboro Museum.
It populates, yeah. Quite a few.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Ms. Oliver, about entertainment over in the Goldsboro community back in the day. Was there,
Talk about the Chitlin Circuit.
was there?
Yeah, we were part of the Chitlin Circuit.
Yeah.
And when I say the Chitlin Circuit, that means that the entertainment, the black entertainment that played on that circuit may have started in Miami and they worked their way up. Or either they started in Atlanta and they worked their way down, playing only black entertainment bars. And the reason they called it a chitlin circuit because there was not very much money circulated at that time, so they would give them a bowl of chitlins and some rice. And that's what.
Make a lot of money.
Name the type of musicians that played, the famous musicians
That played here in Sanford
in
and Goldsboro
Goldsboro.
and Orlando. B.B. King was here every Friday night.
Really?
Yeah,
Ray Charles come here? Cause I know.
Ray
he used to stay
Charles,
at the
Ray
Goldsboro
Charles
down
lived
there.
in Goldsboro. Yeah, he left Goldsboro when he was around 8 years old to go to
The school of the
St.
blind.
Augustine, the blind school.
That's
The
in
house that he
movie.
lived in is still standing. He still got relatives here.
I did
That's
not
in the
know.
movie.
Mhm.
It's in the beginning,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
where his mom sends him off to the school of the blind.
Mhm.
Right, but I don't
That
know
was
if
Goldsboro.
you don't know it's Goldsboro though. In
They
the
say,
movie, they do.
just like one word.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And, I saw as a kid, we used to go to Orlando. I saw James Brown, Etta James, you name them, I've seen them all.
That was South Street Casino? That was
It's-
South Street Casino y'all went
At
to?
South Street Casino and in Eatonville,
Club Eaton?
Club Eaton in Eatonville. And we had a hotel, we had our own hotel here in Sanford called the McAllister Motel.
What was his tagline?
Nobody can say that Mr. Henry don't pay. His name was Henry McAllister.
I grew up in Alabama, graduated from high school in 1959, which I know is ancient times for some people. And we liked rock and roll in the late 50s, mid to late 50s. Could not get that music on a white station, radio station. So we found the black stations in Montgomery, and that we would tune into that after school. We'd meet at people's houses and dance, and yeah, and
What part
we
of
didn't
Alabama?
want to listen to Pat Boone. South of Montgomery, Troy.
South of Troy area, cause you know I'm from Alabama too.
Yeah.
And all my family in Alabama were, they were singers, but they were brown billies. You don't know what a brown billy is?
No.
That's a black hillbilly.
All right, we done with the lecture. We done for today. I gotta get home.
Thank you very much. If you have not been to the Goldsboro Museum, please go. This is just a fraction. Every item there has a story, and she is a great